I'm your humble interlocutor for today. I think we're going to have a great panel. It's all around graphic novels, comics, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to read some brief descriptions, brief bios of our guests today, and then I have some questions that'll get us started. And maybe there'll be some questions that show up in the chat, or maybe there are questions that don't show up in the chat, but that's okay. Now, I don't quite have this in alpha order, but it's kind of more or less in order how I see people on the screen. Mariah-Rose Marie is a U.S.-born writer, artist, and poet, working largely between television and editorial projects. Some clients include Warner Brothers Animation, The New Yorker, Titmouse Inc., and The Nib, though she is perhaps best known for her socio-political centered comics, such as The Reality of Hate Crimes, found in the Ignatz Award-winning anthology, Be Gay, Do Comics. Her work often centers around nature, ancestry, and humor, with an emphasis on humanity beyond borders and the inherent worth in all living things. She is currently based in Chicago, working on her unannounced debut graphic novel. Josh Trujillo is a writer and narrative designer based in Los Angeles. He is the creator of the colorful children's book, Lost Beast, Found Friend, the sports comic, Dodge City, and the romance anthology, Love Machines, in 2021. Christopher Cantwell, Jen Bazaldua, and Josh created the queer Captain America, Aaron Fisher from Marvel Comics. News of Aaron's first appearance was featured in outlets including Entertainment Weekly, The Today Show, and The Hill. Aaron will debut in the United States of Captain America in June. Shannon Watters is the senior editor and head of Boom Box Blind at Boom Studios, the imprint behind critically acclaimed comics and graphic novels like Giant Days, The Backstagers, Lumberjanes, which I love, Fence, Goldie Vance, Heavy Vinyl, The Avant-Gardes, and many, many others. She's also the co-creator and co-writer of the award-winning hit comic book series, Lumberjanes. She lives with her partner in Los Angeles. Amanda Meadows is a senior editor at Oni Press, where she currently oversees editorial for Oni's sexual wellness, gender studies, and romance imprint, Limousin. Right? I'm messing it up, right?
Oh, all yes, right. It's Limerence. Yeah, sorry, Limerence Press.
No, thank you, Limerence. Thank you. She's also passionate about editing wild humor comics, like the anticipated series Orcs in Space from Justin Roiland, and bringing French comics to the U.S. as with award-winning titles like Invisible Differences by ASD activist Julia Jazz and Millie Caroline. She was an editor at Lion Forge Comics, Published Weekly Rising Star on Reed, and co-founder of the Devastator. Ooh. She can also be heard on the Bad Books podcast, Dirt Cheap from Sony and Neon Hum Media. Pamela Ribon, the screenwriter, Moana, Ralph Breaks Internet Bears, performer, TV writer, comic book artist, best-selling novelist, and film independent directing lab fellow. She is currently adapting her comic series Slam, co-created with Veronica Fish as an animated half-hour with Rooster Teeth and Minnow Mountain for HBO Max. She's attached to direct her live-action feature adaptation of her critically acclaimed graphic novel, My Boyfriend is a Bear, co-created with Cat Forrest. And she's also adapting her comedic memoir, Notes to Boys and Other Things I Shouldn't Share in Public, as an animated series to FX's Cake. Carly Usdin is an award-winning filmmaker, comic book writer, based in Los Angeles. Their first feature, Suicide Kale, won the Audience Award for Best First Feature at LitFest 2016, and is now available on iTunes and Amazon Prime. Carly also created Heavy Vinyl and the Avant-Gardes for Boom Studios. Heavy Vinyl was nominated for a 2018 Prism Award, honoring the best in LGBTQAI+ comics. Avant-Garde was nominated for a 2020 GLAAD Award as well. And I'm Gary Phillips. I'm mostly a crime fiction writer. I do write comics now and then. I have something in the, I guess, just released about a month ago called Noirs in the Black. That came out from Fabrice Sabowski, who's a transplanted French cat who wrote some stuff for Marvel Comics and now sort of starting his own comics line. and I'm a staff writer on Snowfall, which is a show on FX about South Central in the 80s, where I grew up, about crack and the CIA. All right, so to get us rolling, how about I'll start with Mariah-Rose, because I see you on the upper left side, and I work my way around. What is it about comics? What is it about this meeting that first attracted you to comics?
Okay, I'm having a little tiny trouble hearing, but just to clarify, the question was what first drew me to the comic medium? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's a great question. I guess career-wise, I did start out with storyboarding. I was starting at Warner Bros. Animation, and that was a very easy way to get real acquainted with composition and action and storytelling, really. So it's kind of been an easy transition. I did comics before that, and now I'm kind of doing it after. It's just a great vehicle to show color, movement, dialogue that's a little bit more rich than just words and a little bit less labor intensive than full animation. That's how I'm looking at it.
Very good. For you, Pamela?
How did I first get drawn to the medium? I feel like, I was going through a divorce and I was having a hard time staying with fiction and prose. And I went to a comic book retrospective at the Pacific Arts, or maybe it was LACMA, I can't quite remember, it was a while ago. And I walked into a room that was just Chris Ware's work. Yeah. And it just changed what I knew could happen. It was a completely different introduction to comics than anything I'd had before. And I thought, this is how you can really take a moment and make it emotional and intimate and big at the same time.
Had you been a comic reader at some point in the past?
No, just wasn't exposed to it in any way. It wasn't around or handed to me. So it just always seemed like something boys did, but even in secret, I was not invited into that world. So.
How about for you?
I grew up reading like newspaper comics in a big way. So Calvin and Hobbes and like Foxtrot and stuff like that. And I wasn't a big fan of superhero comics. So my first exposure to comic book comics was Bone in Disney Adventures. Disney Adventures republished some Bone that had been colored. And I was like, this is the best. I didn't know that comic books could be like this. And I was sort of out of American comics until, with the exception of Bone, until I found a comic called Blue Monday when I was in middle school. It's a China Clugston teen John Hughesian manga influenced from Oni Press, Amanda. And I fell in love with it. And I fell in love with everything Oni was publishing in the early 2000s and late 90s. And I was hooked. That's what got me. I wanted to be a comic book editor ever since. Ever since I saw China ragging on her editor in the margins of her comics. So.
Very good. Well, and you're up next, Amanda. Now, I will say, I have to also give some love to Oni, because that was my first break, as it were, into comics. I did a couple of crime miniseries for comics way back in the day. So.
Oh, really? I gotta find those.
Fortunately, I don't think
I'm gonna go through the Oni vault and I'm gonna look for it.
Yes, it'll be deep, and way back in the back of that vault. I think one was called Shot Callers, and then what the heck was I can't. Oh yes, Midnight Mover, and Shot Callers. So there you go.
Cool.
There we go. All right. So for you, Amanda, what drew you to this medium?
Yeah, similar to Shannon. My first entry into comics was through newspaper strips. My dad would read them to my brother and I with voices, and we were, from like as soon as we could both read, we were
we were just going to the library every week and picking up stuff, like picking up picture books and comics and all kinds of weird things, and lots of like weird art and kids magazines that don't exist anymore. But yeah, like I also read a lot of Archie digests. Like I would get those at the store. Yeah. So it was like, I was like a weird sampler platter kid of like some Batman. It was like my only DC thing, Batman, Catwoman. Whenever she was around, I was like, okay, I need to jump into this. and then X-Men, heavily in that sort of late Chris Claremont era.
Right.
Around the animated series too, which also just made me even more into comics. And then by the late 90s, I got kind of turned off by a lot of American comics, you know, that old Image Boom and, you know, just Liefelding everywhere. And so I kind of fell out for a minute, and then I got back into it through Warren Ellis and Grant Morrison's work on the sort of indie, strange side. Pretty much I Vertigo got me back into comics essentially. And then I discovered Fantagraphics, and then it was like, okay, you can be weird. Thank God. So yeah, all that kind of led to, you know, being in publishing. I knew I wanted to be in publishing, but I wasn't sure if I would edit prose or comics. And the more I got into it, and it's just also like half my friends are cartoonists. And so it was just so natural. I feel at home in comics because you can do whatever you want, and you can make your own process and be collaborative.
Dig it. For those who are either listening or are going to see this later on the recording, I should mention that Vertigo went away, and is it back again? I can't remember now, right? But it was a line at DC Comics, DC being one of the top two, right? DC and Marvel. And they're pretty successful attempt to really bring in, you know, creators from other fields, but also then give, you know, more for creator-owned projects, or at least partially creator-owned projects, and a much more wider expanse, right, of material that could be produced, you know, under the Vertigo line. I did something there once with, you know, when Will Dennis was there and stuff. So I had a great time. Okay, Josh, you're up next. What drew you to comics?
Sure. Like a lot of people here, it was newspaper comics. I remember very vividly tracing over Garfield strips and rearranging them to make my own Garfield comics. And then I was always interested in superhero stories, but mostly that was like TV and movies. It really wasn't until I went to Hot Topic as a teenager and would go through the manga section that I got really, really into comics. So like Sailor Moon, Neon Genesis Evangelion, anything with the pretty girl magic was basically like my kind of thing. And then I guess I got into more mainstream superhero stuff kind of with the Ultimates line that came out probably in the early 2000s, Ultimate Spider-Man, and just kind of a more modern take on the superhero genre. And it took itself so seriously that I couldn't help but pay attention to it. But yeah, now it's a lot of like Fantagraphics stuff, a lot of indie stuff. Always looking for the weird thing.
Very cool. And Carly?
Yeah, similarly to everyone here, I got as a kid really into the newspaper strips. I was obsessed with The Far Side and obsessed with Peanuts. And then from that got really into, I was in like middle school, I was just hanging out at the comic book shop near my house with my mom, and we would just hang out at the comic book shop because I didn't have friends.
Wait a minute, so, your mom was into comics?
My mom was also into comics, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah,
very nice.
Super cool. We would just go and like hang out and buy books together, and it was really fun. My big two were probably anything Batman related and X-Men. And then got really, really into Sailor Moon for a while. And then that thing that happens sometimes as you go to high school, you go to college, you kind of fall out of these things that you were into as a kid. And so then, in my 30s, getting back into comics a little bit. But the reason I work in comics, I think, is actually Shannon Watters, who pitched the idea of you should write books for Boom to me a couple of years ago. And I thought she was nuts. And now here we are.
I have another question, but before I get to that question, I'm actually very curious now. Between, I think, Carly and both Amanda, you guys have both mentioned Batman. Well, wait, you mentioned Batman and you mentioned Batman and X-Men, but X-Men too. But so I am very curious because Batman is such a weird, odd, whatever. Amanda, what drew you to Batman comics? Was it Batman and Catwoman, or was it just
literally the Rogues Gallery? It was all villains all the time for me. So like Catwoman was obviously my favorite, very much identified with her. I also grew up just at the tail end of when you would get syndicated reruns of Gilligan's Island and the original Star Trek and Batman from the early Batman.
The
so
60s.
So
Adam West, yes. Hilarious.
From age 3, I was already kind of obsessed with all that camp. I needed it in my life. It's kind of the only DC property that consistently will bring me back here and then sometimes.
Interesting. And for you, Carly?
It's almost verbatim what Amanda just said. My parents I would watch the reruns of the 1960s Batman with my parents. I was obsessed with it, the campiness, the silliness. Yes. And then, of course, then shifting into the comics and into the Tim Burton films, yes. It's such a different version of Batman and everything. But I just love the character so much. But I was so into the villains. Oh, my God. Yeah. And I really loved Robin. I really was really into Robin. I was he needs to get more stuff to do.
Very good. All right. Now I'm going to put the editors on the spot for a minute. And I guess I'll so you, Shannon. So, it's such a grind, and just I guess in the general way, and not to get anybody's hopes up out there, but what do you look for when you get a proposal, when you get something cold, right? Somebody maybe you don't know, right? Somebody maybe you've heard their name somewhere, whatever. But what is it that excites you, about any pitch, proposal that you might get?
Let's see. For me,
Shannon.
Oh,
there we go.
I think we got it.
I got it.
Yeah.
Cool. For me, I really look for, first of all, a really strong idea. I feel like you can, if you have a really strong backbone of an idea, you can build and take away and really build layers, take away layers, on and on and on. But if you start kind of with a weak thesis,
right,
then you're treading water, right? You're trying to build something that's nothing's ever going to stick. So that almost anything can be massaged and built if you have that really, really strong idea. So that, for me, if it's something that you can describe and get people excited about in a couple of sentences, then that gets me excited.
Yes, 100% agree. That's a huge part of it for me too. It's very important that the concept is strong, that it's supported by, if it's fiction, that the characters in the world and all of those things are in concert with each other and support each other in some way, whether it's subverting it or playing to the tropes, also finding ways to not go paint by numbers with genre, or worse, when someone kind of gets lost in the plot and it's clear that they've got the overall story, but the middle bits are a little, mushy. If all the ingredients are there, I'm there. I'll get in the kitchen and help, fix it up. But if it's a little too I don't know if they really know what the story is, then it becomes so much harder to edit, because you have to at least be starting with a strong set of expectations creatively, whether that's, this is going to be done in inks and watercolor, so this is going to be a longer process, or just sort of keeping all those little logistical things in the back of mind when I'm also reading the creative. Yeah, another thing I really want to see is heart, especially if it's fiction, that there is compassion and empathy somewhere. And even if it's placed in strange places, that we, you know, get led there in ways that are earned. But yeah, and then with nonfiction, I also edit a lot of nonfiction now with Lumberjanes Press, and that is usually like, why this person, why now, for this topic? And like, if those genes don't fit right away, then it's probably not the right person for the topic. So sometimes someone comes to me with a topic, and sometimes I have a topic and I look for the right person to do it. Like I'm actually talking with Mariah-Rose on a project, a little goss. But yeah, those are the main things I look for. You know, a strong concept told confidently with all the ingredients there from beginning to end. And, you know, we get to know the characters, some character bios, a little thing about the world, explaining how the world works and how that affects the characters. And, you know, what we're supposed to kind of take away from that thematically. Those are all things I like to see.
Very good. Very good.
I think especially with monthly comics, just a quick note, like character-driven stuff, people want to come back and spend time with those characters. Plot is there and great and important, but like they're coming back every month to spend time with those characters. You want your story to be really character-driven. So
absolutely, yeah, that's the backbone of serialization. It's if you can't follow these people, then you know.
Yeah, and if you don't spend time with them, So I'm gonna, I guess, now get to the folks on kind of the other side of the desk, and so let's go with you, Mariah-Rose. I mean, as the writer, how much do you sweat? How much do you try to hone it down? How much do you try to sharpen it to make that, you know, to make that outline, that thing you want to do, and know that, you know, in case you're not being invited by the editor to make this pitch, you know, what are you thinking about? How many pages are you thinking about? How tight does it have to be, or how loose can it be?
Well, I can't say that I have any experience doing this.
These are all my anxieties that I'm asking you about. So that's
I feel that. I think I'm really on the. I mean, it feels really good to hear Shannon and Amanda's feelings for what they're looking for, because I also put empathy as one of the highest things that should be at the core of a story, and also character-driven. You're just in it to watch these people grow and go through stuff, and so I don't know how much I could say about my current project, but
no, don't spill the beans.
Yeah,
just, you know, just
keep it,
general.
I'll keep it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just like to yeah, I just like to paint a broad brush. I'm really heavy with world building. I love to world build little high fantasy stuff. I like to make the reader, hopefully, the editor, hopefully feel like they could really see a lot more happening than just the main plot, you know? It's very subjective, I suppose, but some of my favorite media is something like Sorry to Bother You, where you just see this really weird, small details that you're like, he just pulled a little liquor bottle out of a big bottle, and now he's serving that liquor. I'm like, I want to know what that brand is. Like, I want to know the whole thing about it. And so I'm trying to just build on top of, strong concepts and ideas and worlds that reflect, you know, the current things going on that we're all feeling underneath all the professionalism and things. It's like the world's a little rickety right now. So trying to like tie all that in, and then hope that somebody really, really gets it.
Responds to it, yeah. And so Pamela, for you, coming from these various worlds of screenwriting and script writing, and having a little bit of familiarity with how having done, pitches in the room and that silence in the room. I mean, what do you think about in terms of, when you're trying to do a comic book project? I mean, does all that come into play, or, is it, I guess, how do you channel it for the comics?
Well, in a couple of cases, it's I was trying to sell it as a sitcom, and people were like, "I don't understand how that would work or look," or and it looks like this and it works like this, and there's no budget. So it's been a really great way to have a proving ground when your style might be so weird that people don't exactly know who the audience is. Just they don't know what to compare it to.
Right.
And the nice thing about this audience is if you are starting with really interesting characters and empathy and heart, there's a world waiting, hungry for these kinds of stories. And then you go make a TV show or a movie about the comic book that you made because you couldn't sell the TV show about the characters that you really love.
Right.
Too real.
So, Josh, I'll ask you the same question, but slightly different, which is to say, because I am very, very curious, how did this aspect of Captain America come about?
Yeah, I was approached by my editor. It's part of a larger project called the United States of Captain America that's kind of introducing new Captain America versions for different groups. And I was approached to do the queer Captain America, and whether it's working in nonfiction, like stuff for the Nib, or working for these like very known characters, I'm always trying to find my voice within it and try to find a way to be authentic. And sometimes that can be tricky. But for this Aaron Fisher character, the Captain America, I wanted to focus on a lot of issues that were important to me. And a big one is kind of queer homelessness and youth homelessness in general. And trying to find a way to speak to a real world problem using shields and explosives and patriotism was very interesting. But I mean, that's the challenge of what we do, right? We were trying to take something really small and personal and important to us and make it like explode onto the page. And so I try to take that approach with whatever I'm working on.
That's great. And how is it that the editor knew about your work?
I suspect it had something to do with Boom and Shannon, but the story I know is that when I did this book, Dodge City, which is about a dodgeball team, Boom did these promotional stress balls that you could throw around. And I gave one to a fan, not knowing they were an editor at Marvel. And so during the pandemic, she was looking for someone to write this story. And she was moving stuff in her office back home, and she found the stress ball at just the right time. So I owe everything to the marketing department of Boom Studios.
There you go. That's great. That's great.
Oh, Josh.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Just find that stress ball. Oh yeah, that guy. Oh yeah. That's All right. There
now I
you
know
go.
what to do with the box of Avant-Garde's foam basketballs I have in my closet.
And Carly, for you, I mean, having worked sort of in, with established comic companies, do you find that as fulfilling, or do you prefer more an independent, bend, or is it a combination, thereof?
I've been incredibly fortunate. All my work in comics has been with Boom and with Shannon, actually. So, hey, buddy. And that's my editor right there. And yeah, it's for me, it's been a lot of like, what were the comics I wish I had when I was a kid? Because that's when I was really reading them. I was in middle school. And so all the books I've created have just been these sort of like cute, like queer coming of age, like groups of friends doing something together kind of thing. Whether it's fighting crime or playing basketball or selling records or whatever. It's all been really wish fulfillment for me. It's just like, what did I wish I had as a kid? What did I wish I was doing? Things like that. And that's kind of where all of it's come from for me.
I want to stay with you for this next question, or I'll start with you for the next question. And you've kind of touched on it, but being the old man here, growing up where I did, the days of Kirby and Gil Kane and, John Buscema, all those cats, Marie Severin, etc. And I'll just say parenthetically, where I grew up in those days, you did not read a DC comic book because, you were a chump if you read a DC comic. You had to be reading a Marvel comic on my block. Because, Spider-Man, the Hulk and, Black Panther, etc. So, all right. So, and now I lost my thought. No, I didn't lose my thought. All right, Carly, can any story be told in comics?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think the possibilities are completely endless. I come from the world of film and television. I started there, went over to comics, just trying to do both now because I love them both so much. Right. And there's differences, but there's so many similarities too. And I think that you can write anything, and someone can. I can't draw to save my life, but somebody can. And there's so many really talented, creative illustrators who can bring things to life. I think you can tell absolutely any story with comics.
Well, and for you, for Shannon, is that, it's certainly the case that to some extent, though, I guess the company always has to worry about the bottom line, but I certainly it's the case that things are more niche now, right? And I think, does that help in a way to be able to tell these various stories?
I think that we are kind of in a really beautiful golden age, and have been for a while. The web allows you to put your work out there and have people see it. And really, comics is such kind of a beautiful visual medium. I think with a lot of other visual storytelling mediums, you need a lot of people involved. Or it's an enormous amount of kind of like brain trust to tell these stories. And I think that there's an intimacy with comics. It can be you and a pencil, and you don't need to do it very well to tell a really beautiful sequential story. Like it's the oldest form of storytelling, right? Is drawings in sequence. And anything. I think anything can be a comic, and I think that is proven more and more every day. It's any story can find its perfect executors, if you will.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, just agreeing. I feel like both Boom and Oni, I think we have in common that we look for unique and more like sort of youth and new adult oriented work. That, we're not afraid of genre, but we also aren't going to like put out 8 witch books in the same season,
Right.
Yeah. Right. And so there's always a little bit of a fight between, do you want to follow a trend or do you want to create the next thing? But the latter is a risk. You don't, we're every book, to a publisher, I guess to the accountant of a publisher, it's all a bunch of lotto tickets, and we're, seeing which ones will earn out. And for the editor, it's truly the opposite. We really do feel like, oh, well, I wouldn't be working on this book if I didn't think everybody in the whole world needs to read this.
Exactly.
And so it's definitely something that the editors have a lot of heart, like a lot of sweat equity, as one of my bosses likes to say. And, it makes you really care to carry something from start to finish, because it's, all told, anywhere from a year to 3 years to make a graphic novel.
Right.
And there's just so much labor involved that you want to make sure that you're doing it right. There are trends that I think are easy to sort of jump in on, but you're not necessarily making anything that's going to stand out. So, we try to think about the audience specifically. Who are these people? Will they still be interested in these kinds of stories, after the Instagram hashtag isn't cool anymore, And, so like, for example, like I recently acquired a really sweet cottagecore sort of comic, but it's also just a really sweet, queer story about someone finding themselves on a commune, you know, and it's like, it's just, you know, that's not like a formula.
Right. Well, it could be. It might be. Yeah,
it could be. We could be starting the next formula.
That's right.
Who knows?
That's it. Hey, so Josh, I want to slightly change the question, which is to say, have you found love and acceptance in mainstream comics, or do you figure you'll sort of straddle that line and try to do more in mainstream as well as continue to do the other kind of work you want to do?
It's always hard to find a balance, and I'm sure a lot of you who work in TV and film, it's kind of like, how do you balance your comic stuff? I work in video games as my side hustle, I guess you'd call it. And so at least for me, whether I'm telling a story about Superman or telling a story about team dodgeball players, you know, I want it to have personal stakes and I want it to feel kind of real and lived in.
Yes.
And so for me, that's like telling more personal stories. And so I guess I don't care if I'm writing like an indie comic about capybaras or if I'm writing about Ms. Marvel or something. It just, as long as it matters to me, it doesn't make a difference.
Dig. All right, Pamela, I'm going to put you on the spot because it was one of the questions I asked. Has Hollywood corrupted comics, or has comics corrupted Hollywood?
Mm-hmm. Well, whose comics? And
yeah, right.
I'll give everybody will be able to chime in. I don't know.
I think that let's look at the power balance there. Which industry is bigger, has more money, has more lawyers, has more unions, and it's Hollywood and, you know, production studios around the world. So it's like, on one hand, you know, comics culture has penetrated movie culture in the mainstream superhero way, I would say, but I also think a lot of that, the trend and the way, all the opinions that we all have about the trend, whether you love it or not, is really just business for them, and it's not about the books. And like, that's one of the reasons why we really like doing like OGNs, and, you know, then an OGN can kind of be treated, when it's an adaptation, like its own thing.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, Oni definitely, and Boom obviously has quite a track record in, you know, getting original books into like TV or film. And, you know, to varying degrees of success, you know, like Scott Pilgrim, you know, like they, you know, where it's like, it wasn't successful at first, but then it took on a life of its own. And it's only made the book sales go up year by year. And that's the real reason why most publishers, at least in probably Shannon's, in my opinion, would want to do it. But, you know, there are a lot of conflicting interests. So it's definitely your mileage may vary depending on who you're dealing with. I know, that's my take on it.
All right. Anybody else want to chime in? Yes? No? Hollywood has done it? It's totally corrupted comics? Comics doesn't care?
I guess I'd say, you know, this Hollywood gold rush for comics, I think, has helped comics in general. I think it's bringing in a lot of fresh voices, and it's giving creators a lot of hope that they might be able to make a living doing what they love. And also, it's exposing so many people to comics in a way. My mom is reading Walking Dead, for example.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
I think she watches it every week, and she's like, I need to start reading these comics, Josh. What would you recommend? So I gave her the thick thing, thinking it would scare her away, but she's halfway through it.
Great. That's great. That's pretty good. That's great. Well, I'll just say, for me, just from a mechanical viewpoint or a technical viewpoint, having lived through the time of those really, really cheesy Captain America TV movies where you had I don't know if you guys can find us on YouTube. We had a plastic shield, and he had this motorcycle that it would come out the back of a van. I'm not making this up. It was like a couple of TV movies like this. And then there was a really terrible, strange Captain America movie where they made the Red Skull this Italian aristocrat. Anyway, so finally still being alive to see that wonderful version of, Captain America: First Avenger, right? With what's his face, Chris Evans as Captain America, and the stuff that looked like it came from from Kirby's panels. I just I almost cried. I mean, I almost cried in the theater, man. It was just great. It was just lovely. For what else that engine has become for Marvel, that one that one incarnation, I thought they really got it right. That they modernized it, and yet was still something that harkened back to that why you as a kid loved that Captain America comic book. So there you go. All right. All right, we're getting up on time, so I guess I gotta move this along. Let's get back to, we haven't heard from Mariah-Rose in a little bit. So Mariah-Rose, because this is always a thing they always ask writers. So what is your writing routine like every day?
Every day. Ooh, that would be great. Every day.
Or intermittently.
So when I am on a routine, I try to do it in the morning.
Okay.
Like all things that I have to use my brain, I just try to do it in the morning. And the script process for a graphic novel is really similar to film, or like the scripts I was working with TV. And so that's been a nice way to just visualize and have a little stack of sticky notes that you kind of can thumbnail things out, and laptop open with multiple tabs for the script itself, and then just like world building ideas that come up. You're like, oh, I'm gonna add that, and then I try to cut myself off after like 2 hours, because if I'm in the flow, it could be all day, and then I realize like I stand up and my spine makes like a bad noise, and I'm like, okay. But I got a lot done today, and so that's the more normal
right
process. It comes in bursts, but I'm trying to make it more routine.
Very cool. I'm going to ask Pamela sort of the same question, but I'll just say, being more of a prose writer, I try to make a word count every day, like I'm specifically working on a book or but it's certainly different than when I'm doing a comic, and it's certainly even different, like if we're doing, something for the show where you're, writing the, doing the script. So Pamela, for you, is it a page count? Is it a matter of hours? Is it literally just 8 hours, or is it, what do you figure? What is your like daily routine when you're actually doing the writing?
I'm pretty deadline based, and I make fake deadlines for myself. So, I mean, Shannon knows I'm good at a deadline, and Amanda does not, because pandemic happened.
Yeah, I got pandemic Pam, so it's not, it doesn't count.
That's right. I see.
Everybody's
right.
Pandemic deadline situation was
truly.
It was a flow.
I did not anticipate being a part-time school teacher.
Oh wow!
While a comic book writer and balancing screenwriting, which actually pays the bills, because comic books do not. So I make blocks of time based backwards from when things are due, and if things don't have a deadline, I give them a fake one for myself.
Okay, very good. To keep you disciplined. So Shannon, look, I'll ask the question, but slightly differently, even though you are a writer as well. And so for the editor, how do you figure you work with writers? I mean, in terms of deadlines, and do you give them fake deadlines, or do you give them the real deadline?
Oh, every deadline is real, Gary. Come on.
All right. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry. All right.
Every deadline is real. Every deadline is real.
That's it. That's right.
No, sure. I mean, here's the thing. Like, it sucks to sit down and write. It's very hard. It's just like, it's very hard. It's never gets easier. It always is hard. And sometimes you're like, wow, this is great. I'm the best that's ever lived. But like, so I try to be, again, I am very deadline based. I'm very structured around deadlines. But I tend to try and, if there is time, respect the fact that sometimes you're going through it, and sometimes you need time. You need any room that I can give you. I always try to give, because writing is not a machine process. It is always an act of intense, beautiful labor, and So, you know, writing, drawing, any creative pursuit. And I'm very lucky that I get to, you know, to pay people to do that for things that they love to do. But I try to respect the fact that everybody is a human being and has a life. Right. So that's, but every deadline is real. Ignore everything that I just said.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
that's
you
right.
know, making a book is, you know, you're making an agreement with another creative person to like divine something that will materialize in a couple of years. And so like on one hand, you have this like tight structure that's like, we can't miss this deadline, but also it's like, oh, we're the ones making this. And, you know, if we need more time, then we will give ourselves more time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've got a book that the pandemic really hit this one creator really, really hard in multiple ways that were really personal and like the kinds of things that just take forever to recover from. And it was just like, all right, you know, we're taking your book off of the season schedule. Yeah. We're going to focus on you, you know, like, and, you know, send them a care package, you know, when we can. And, you know, that's, so, you know, we definitely want people to be able to live comfortably enough to be able to focus on their work, but we know that that's not possible because we live in this joke of a country. And so,
it's cold.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, we were like, feed us, and they're like, LOL, maybe. But you know, so it's difficult, especially if you live in like a high cost of living place like Los Angeles or New York. So yeah, we try our best to be malleable where possible and strong where needed, you know.
Right. Very good. All right, so I see we're almost at time. So real quick, then I'll get to Carly and Josh. The same kind of question, which is to say, so Carly, do you work deadline to deadline?
Deadline is the only way I get anything done. And I can't give myself a deadline because I know that I made it up. So I have to get the deadline from an external source.
Got it.
Because I just I won't listen to myself.
Right.
Yeah, same. I can easily manipulate myself.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And I'm a procrastinator by nature. So if my deadline is Monday, I will finish it all on Sunday night. And sorry, my dogs are barking.
That's all right. We're at time. So Josh, you get the last word on deadlines and making that count.
Sure. I can't get anything done unless I write it down in a checklist. And this goes for emails and managing pages as they come in or whatever it is. And so that's always been really helpful for me. But there's a lot to writing comics that's like business, and there's a lot that's like art management, and you have to kind of find a way to balance it all at the same time. All right. That is great. Wise words to live and draw and write by. And I want to thank our panelists who have participated in today. I guess we call this thing graphic description or whatever the heck it is we were doing. But listen, I learned a lot. And Mariah-Rose, Josh, Shannon, Amanda, Pamela, Carly, thanks so much. See you all soon.
Thank you so much for having us. This was fun.
And thanks, Gary, for moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.